I'm Rick Prescott here to talk about my book, Save the Beatles, and on this video I want to talk about how the chapters are structured. Each of the big third section of the book is the part where I put together what I call the fused albums, and there's another video available where you can find out more about what that means. There are 8 such chapters that result in 7 albums. One of those segments doesn't result in an album because there was not enough music to do it, and that's called the hiatus period, and that's in the late 70s, and you won't be surprised by when that was. But each of the other chapters actually takes a look at all of the music that the Beatles made during a very specific period of time. These are the solo Beatles now, the very specific period of time, sorts them into which tracks are eligible to be included on a Meta Beatles fused album, and then from that list of eligible tracks assembles the actual album and how it is all put together. So each chapter includes several parts. Here is this is a chapter. Well, this is Fusion Era number 3. It results in an album called Be Here Now, and you can see which actual releases the solo Beatles had from which this album is created. The album is distilled, and Be Here Now happens to be a double album. There is a set of quotes in each chapter about what the Beatles were talking about at that time regarding their relationship with each other, or the music that the others were making, or things like that, which gives you a sense of, well, how were they sort of interacting during that period of time. There is a detailed chronology for each section. The detailed chronology, this is all based in fact. There's no speculation here. This is all fact. It tells you exactly when various important events happened, and that's important for context, for understanding how the music was made within a very specific time period, and how often that music is a reaction to that time period. Sometimes it's a reaction to what the other Beatles were doing, not always. There's an introduction in which I kind of lay the foundation for how the album could come together. And there is a chart that talks about the recording. And the recording, you'll find an actual schedule of when each of the solo Beatles did their recording to kind of compare the 4 of them, and you'll see sort of how they are often recording at the same time in various different places. And that's how we sort of figure out what music lines up to become the albums. And then there's a quick overview of the materials, and materials is basically just the tracks that they recorded in the real world, the actual tracks that they recorded. And then for each solo Beatle, there's a list of the tracks. Each list has each item has a thumbnail review, but also some vital information about that, and then a little bit of discussion about those tracks and about the albums that were created during that period of time. So there's a section for each of the 4 Beatles where you can get really detailed information about those. That is where I review those albums, at least to the degree that I consider how the assembler might have heard them. They're not classic album reviews, but they do draw out where the individual Beatles were at that time, what the music either did or didn't do relative to their abilities, their talents, and the situation and things like that. So some of those reviews, I try and be frank, and I tried to learn that from George Martin, who was very frank about the Beatles, and he considered, where we look at the Beatles catalog and go, well, what's a bad track? Where are the bad tracks? He had them. He knew them. He knew where they were, and he had a list that he considered maybe not bad tracks, but lesser tracks. And so we do the same thing for the solo era in order to draw that out. So that becomes the list of available tracks for the assembly. And from that list, then, there's a long description of how the assembly comes to be, and you can kind of see little charts about how tracks get sequenced and how things get moved around. And once that is done, then there's a detailed information about the actual release. The tracks, who wrote them, how it all comes together. And then I give details on how to make it yourself, so if you want to make that album for yourself, you can. A lot of the resources to do that are available on SaveTheBeatles.com, so if you have trouble doing that, if it's not your thing, there are some options on SaveTheBeatles.com to actually hear what these albums sound like. Next, I consider when the Fused album would have been released, and I look at the most popular albums during that period of time by looking at the charts basically on the day that the album would have been released. I'm sorry. The first chapter is the most popular albums since the previous release. So that gives you an idea of how the music industry changed during that period of time. The next is the topping the charts. This is the actual what was popular at the very moment that the album would have been released. And then, as you can see, discussion, in which I sort of do a review of the Fused album itself to talk about how it might have fit into the Beatles' chronology, how it might have been received by the public or critics, and how we can hear what we hear about the solo Beatles, or in this case the meta Beatles, what we hear about them as their journey continues, if the tracks are rearranged that way. In the case of Be Here Now, it's interesting because they all do something of a reaction to Beatlemania during that period of time, and that becomes the album, which you wouldn't notice if you simply listen to the solo albums that were made during that time. But when you pull out the tracks and you put them together the way that George Martin might have, we call it the assembler, the way the assembler would do it, you hear something different, and it's worth hearing. Anyway, that's it for now. Save the Beatles is available wherever you buy books, or you can visit SaveTheBeatles.com. Thanks for watching.